Well, it has officially been 2 years since the world started to spiral, and it's safe to say that this decade hasn't exactly been a popular one so far. At the time, many people claimed that 2020 was the worst year in human history. Personally, I think these years would have something to say about that, but it certainly was one of the least enjoyable in recent memory, so much so that I disappeared off this website for the entire year. And the year after that. However, I don't need to sit here and keep reminding you that the past 2 years sucked, since you've already heard that 1,000 times. But I do think it's appropriate for us to catch up before I get up and running again. So, how have you been? I'm going to stop you right there because I don't really give a shit. As for me, not much has happened since the last time I uploaded. I turned 20, I turned 21, I turned 22, and I have braces now, so it is a blessing that I have to cover my face in public. And what better way to fix my appearance than with a Sminky shorts mask? So that just covers my personal life. In terms of world-changing global events, I admit we lived through about 15 of them. But if you ask me, everything really went haywire when they cancelled the Tidy Towns competition. That right there was my breaking point. This decade has gotten off to a terrible start, as we had 20 years worth of chaos thrown at us in 2 years, and I'm not exactly hopeful that 2022 will be much better. It's impossible to tell what the next 8 years will bring, so instead of fueling our anxiety even further by speculating what the rest of this merciless decade has in store for us, I figured that we should remain positive by reflecting on a simpler time. A time when the word COVID wasn't even in our vocabulary, and Ireland's biggest health pandemic was the introduction of a Tayto Chocolate Bar. Let's take a look back at Ireland's highs and especially its lows during the 2010s. January 1st, 2010. It's the beginning of a brand new decade, and the entire country has been turned into a f***ing ice rink. Ireland is always ready to enjoy a white Christmas because it's such a rare occurrence here, but this was taken way too far in Christmas 2009, as snow and ice continued to wreak havoc all over Ireland until the middle of January. Of course, I just saw this as an excuse to enjoy an extra few days of Christmas holidays and to play in the snow, but reflecting on it now, the big freeze of 2010 was much more of a nuisance than I remember it being. This was our coldest winter since 1963, completely disrupting normal life by causing road closures and the cancellations of flights and public transport. Despite the novelty of the situation for a freeloading child like me, this big freeze was a major annoyance for those who actually contributed to society. But on January 8th, 2010, there was one event that unified the nation right in the middle of the chaos. It was a legendary moment in history, one that brought laughter and joy to millions of people nationwide when they needed it most.
It's still dangerous for Dublin pedestrians.
You all knew it was coming. This unknown man's misfortune was a cultural reset and arguably the most famous clip in the history of RTÉ News. I guess it's nice that we could all come together to laugh at a guy almost breaking his neck on national television. It's hard to believe that it's been 12 years since this was broadcast, and it's probably as good a time as any to finally make a confession. I never found this very funny. Please don't hurt me. For some reason, I didn't get what was so revolutionary and hilarious about this video at the time, and I still don't. Sure, it was worthy of a quiet exhale through my nose the first time I saw it, but I have never understood how pretty much everybody in Ireland treats it as the funniest thing in existence. Don't get me wrong, I'm not just going out of my way to be a contrarian by proclaiming that a popular thing is bad actually. Even in 2010 I wasn't a huge fan of this video, and that was a time when the fucking annoying orange could crack me up consistently. My hot take here is that the nationwide obsession with this video can be attributed to the fact that this was Ireland's first big meme. This happened at the start of 2010, precisely the point when the internet and social media were truly becoming mainstream. It was the first time Irish people came together to spread a homegrown viral video on this new internet thing. And 12 years later, despite the rapid evolution of internet culture and what we consider funny or not, we are still beating this 5-second clip to an absolute pulp. I don't want to sound like a typical bitchy YouTuber, so I'm trying my best to enjoy this as much as everyone else does, but it's just a guy falling down. This is caveman humor. However, I'm willing to accept that my dryball's opinion on this video may be objectively incorrect. It's probably a terrible idea to kick off my return to YouTube with a take that nobody will agree with, and there's no denying that it was the first defining Irish moment of the 2010s. But I must admit that while I have never cared for the incident itself, the mystery of who this guy is absolutely intrigues me. To this very day, we don't know a single thing about his identity. No clues, no evidence, no leaks from his family or friends. We really have nothing to work off here. It's one of the best kept secrets in Irish history, and if he still hasn't revealed himself after 12 years, he's probably taking this to the grave. And it's weird to think that while we have no idea who he is, he's out there somewhere. You could have walked past him in the street at some point in your life, and you'd never know that you did. Sometimes I wonder how often he thinks about that infamous clip. Is he embarrassed after all these years, or is he proud of his accidental fame? He seems to be set on total anonymity, And the sad truth is that we'll probably never solve this mystery in our lifetimes. But while this poor bastard is still yet to be identified, his legacy is everlasting, and his contribution to Irish TV will never be forgotten. Fast forward to July 11th. The 2010 Leinster football final is taking place in Croke Park, and Dublin have finally taken a step back and decided to give the other teams a chance for once. It's the wee county versus the county they gave us a Mr. Tayto theme park a few months later, clashing to take home the Delaney Cup. It's a standard and otherwise forgettable episode of the Sunday game, right up to a major plot twist at the last minute. It's looking like the trophy is going to find a new home in Louth, and 128,000 people are going to be thrilled. But Gotubin, an unimaginable curveball occurs in the final minute of injury time, when a goal is awarded to the Royal County that should not have been allowed, securing them a controversial victory and causing pandemonium in the stadium. Say what you want about this contentious match, but this is Sunday game script writing at its finest. We get a dramatic story with high stakes, conflict, plot twist, controversy, and it presents the referee as a corrupt antagonist. It inevitably leads to a lot of discourse on the field, and what better way to solve this dispute than to kick the shit out of the referee? The fallout from this game will forever live in infamy, due to its closing moments and the fact that Croke Park turned into the Coliseum for a few minutes. The whole storyline of Louth being cheated out of a victory last second felt like a GAA anime, and I simply can't do it any justice by describing it. Rory Stories documents the tale far better than I ever could. What the fuck does that mean? 2010 started with a culture-defining piece of Irish media, and it ended with another one in the form of an iconic music video on December 8th. A duo of relatively unknown Irish comedians unexpectedly achieved a big break with their hit single Horse Outside, making the Rubber Bandits a sudden household name in Ireland. And let me tell you, this was the only thing we talked about in primary school for a solid week when it was released. It had all the ingredients to quickly go viral nationwide, especially at a time when Irish creators didn't have nearly as much of an online presence as they do today. Blind by Boat Club and Mr. Chrome quickly realised that this song had the potential to become Ireland's Christmas #1. The timing seemed perfect, and the people of Ireland were more than willing to support these promising new faces in the Irish comedy scene. So the quest for the Christmas #1 was underway. It was time to end the reign of terror of X Factor winners and hand this title over to the funny guys with the centre bags instead. So, how did it go? Not that great. Yeah, the timing of the song's release wasn't actually quite as perfect as I thought. According to Blind Boy himself, Horse Outside CDs were barely in stock in the weeks leading up to Christmas, and by the time shops finally got big orders in, it was far too late. Due to unfortunate timing, the CDs were pretty much worthless, and they ultimately ended up in a skip, ready to be recycled. Truly one of the greatest injustices in the history of Irish music. X Factor winner Matt Cardle took the #1 spot in predictable fashion, but the Rubber Bandits still achieved an extremely impressive second place, only falling 25,000 copies behind. Just imagine what could have been if those CDs were delivered on time. So that brought 2010 to an underwhelming end, but there was light at the end of the tunnel for Irish comedy very early on in 2011. RTÉ was about to start broadcasting a brand new Irish sitcom, which was exciting news until we found out what it was. Mrs. Brown's Boys. I do not have the patience nor the emotional strength to talk about this show in detail. Refusing to give it a PKMX analysis is the self-care I'm going to provide myself today. Sure, I could sit down and watch the 7-disc box set of the original series to capture some quirky reactions for this video, or alternatively, I could use it as a slitter. The rest of 2011 had its fair share of memorable and historic moments. Some of the biggest events from this year were the respective visits of Queen Elizabeth and the Obamas, both of which occurred within 1 week. Obama didn't really do much of note while he was here. He pretty much just dropped by, had a chat with Enda Kenny, learned the ways of the Hurley, drank some Guinness with Michelle, and went straight back to the White House the same night. He's a busy guy with documents to sign and drone strikes to authorize, so I guess I can't blame him for leaving so soon. On the other hand, the Queen's visit was much more historically significant, and she cared enough to stay for a few days. An event like this hadn't happened in over 100 years, and it signified a reconciled relationship between England and Ireland. Unfortunately, this was completely undermined when Elizabeth decided that she was too sophisticated to drink a humble pint of porter. Committing crimes against the Irish is one of England's favourite pastimes, we just have to live with that. But the Queen visiting the Guinness storehouse and not drinking a single sip of her pint has got to be one of their worst stunts yet. It took another decade before everybody realised that the royal family shouldn't be trusted, but the signs were all there during this visit if you ask me. Both of these visits are highly regarded as some of the defining Irish events of 2011, but in my opinion, that distinction belongs to Ireland's Eurovision comeback from about a week beforehand. After the 2008 Turkey incident, Ireland needed to bring out the big guns to be recognised as the serious threat that they were in the 90s once again. And that is exactly what they did not do. They sent Jedward instead. For comparison's sake, let's just take a quick look at this menace's performance one more time. You know when you have an inside joke with your group of friends that you all think is absolutely hilarious, then you tell that joke to other people outside of your group and it falls completely flat because they don't get it, and you just feel embarrassed as a result? Well, that is exactly what happened to Ireland in 2008 when we discovered that other countries don't find dusting the turkey as funny as we do, and we learned the hard way. Even though it is one of the most absurd and beautifully hilarious piss takes Ireland has ever pulled off, the results seem to indicate that some countries didn't really appreciate this elaborate middle finger to the competition. But this didn't mean that Ireland would have to totally avoid sending novelty acts ever again. It is just the Eurovision after all. This isn't exactly a prestigious competition for the most elite performers, and it's not like Ireland really cares anymore. Ireland phoned it in a long time ago, so they may as well embrace the absurdity and go out swinging while they lose, instead of sending lackluster acts that ultimately get nowhere and are quickly forgotten about. They could still have a fun, lively performance, but they would need more universal appeal and less niche Irish references that nobody outside this island understands. And ideally, the performers would be actual human beings as opposed to, you know, being a weird mechanical turkey in a DJ booth. And in 2011, the perfect duo was right there. Jedward unexpectedly became Irish heroes for a few weeks in 2020, and they earned universal respect from even the most hardcore cynics. By using their platform to speak up about important social issues and to tear people like Piers Morgan to shreds, Jedward solidified themselves as beloved icons. But this wasn't the case in their early days. Everybody seemed to hate these guys with a fiery passion, while I was proudly binging their music videos. I even made my dad text the number to vote for them on the Late Late Show so they'd qualify for the Eurovision in the first place. Like most other people, I absolutely love these guys now, especially because they responded to a DM I sent them in 2020, but I was a next level Jedward supporter back in the day. Naturally, I was hoping that their song Lipstick would secure a long overdue 8th win for Ireland, as I blocked out all the Jedward haters out there who clearly had no taste in music. No matter how you felt about Jedward in 2011, I think everyone in Ireland secretly wanted to see them pull this off and come out on top. And even though an Irish victory wasn't meant to be, Jedward defied the low expectations of their critics and placed really well in the final. 8th place with 119 points. This is still Ireland's best Eurovision result since the beginning of the millennium. This was no surprise to me, honestly. Jedward were such a natural fit, and their chaotic energy perfectly encapsulates the spirit of the Eurovision. Watching them perform in this contest just feels right. It was incredibly impressive what these two underdogs accomplished, so it seemed like the most logical idea would be to give them another chance. Jedward entered once again the following year with their song Waterline, which I thought was infinitely better than Lipstick at the time, and I still stand by that. This was generally a superior performance in every way, so surely the stars were aligning for an even higher placing this time round, and maybe even a victory. They came 19th with only 46 points. Forget what I said earlier about Horse Outside. This is the greatest injustice in the history of Irish music. This might just be my childhood nostalgia speaking, but I have a deep fondness for both of these performances. They're just so endearing to me, and I find it hard to believe that they're a decade old now. Ireland is still experiencing zero luck in the competition to this day, and considering Jedward's recent resurgence in popularity, I think it would be worth a shot to let them run it back one more time. A few months after Jedward's first Eurovision performance, there was a much less pressing issue at hand. It was time for Ireland to elect a new president. What does the President of Ireland do? Who the fuck knows? And it was an unusual event where Ireland didn't screw up an election and actually made a good choice. Despite how popular he is today, Michael D. Higgins wasn't the frontrunner in the opinion polls in the weeks before the election of 2011. This distinction actually belonged to Sean Gallagher, and it seemed like the victory was his for the taking. But in the final debate before election day, a false tweet sent his campaign burning to the ground, and he simply could not recover in time. It was a truly unfortunate situation for Gallagher, and he probably would have become president if not for this televised blunder. But like they say, the end justifies the means. As fate would have it, everyone's favourite Postman Pat character became our president in November 2011, and I haven't looked back ever since. How could you stay mad at this guy for becoming the fan favourite at the last minute? He's so short and old and wrinkly, and he loves his dogs, and he waits in line, and you just want to pinch his cheeks and stroke his hair and... Why did I write that? So, Michael D has been a national treasure ever since, and while I still couldn't tell you what his duties are as president, he makes special guest appearances in big episodes of the Sunday Game, so I've got nothing but respect for him. 2011 will also go down in history as the year when Rihanna pissed off a farmer by streaking in his field. While filming a music video in County Down, Rihanna was apparently unaware of this guy's no nudity policy on the farm, causing him to kick her off his property as a result. He received a lot of criticism for this decision, but I doubt that anybody from the north has ever seen a pair of of breasts, so I can't blame him for being caught off guard. 2012 was a year I mostly remember for one very special gift: the birth of a brand new Irish cartoon series that quickly went viral, produced banger after banger, and rarely missed. I am, of course, referring to Sminky shorts, some of the most quotable and memorable Irish content from the 2010s. Sminky animation exploded as soon as it burst onto the scene, which was no surprise as we generally don't see a lot of independent Irish animation on YouTube. Each cartoon was short and simple, the characters were funny, and they were as Irish as you could get. These videos were destined for success. Throughout 2012, each new Sminky short would become more popular than the last, as they were shared all over social media and enjoyed by thousands of Irish people. How could anyone not laugh at cartoon animals with Irish accents complaining about puddles, walking too fast, suffering from drug addiction, getting murdered? It was a breath of fresh air to witness the success of an independent Irish animator, and 10 years later, they hold up surprisingly well with their ridiculous jokes.
I love the water, so I has to be a fish. You're not a fucking fish!
This would usually be the part where I insult this piece of old Irish media for a cheap gag, but honestly, there's not much to critique here. Well, except for these updated titles and thumbnails. The videos themselves are still really fun to watch in 2022 though, so much so that I may just have to revisit them sometime in the future. While we're talking about Ireland in 2012, I can't escape without mentioning the Euros. So Ireland qualifies for the European Football Championship for the second time in history, the first time being in 1988, and as you'd expect, the country is ecstatic. I am not a soccer fan by any means, but I don't have to follow the sport to recognise how Irish people will always be out in full force to support their team in major games. Ireland doesn't exactly see a lot of success in international spotlight, so whenever Irish athletes do make it to a big stage, millions of Irish people will enjoy every minute and go the extra mile to cheer them on. And the best part is that they're never toxic and excessive like the guys across the pond from last year's Euros. Irish people don't need to assault children and get charged with public indecency to have a good time. Just bring a sign referencing Season 1 Episode 3 of Father Ted and wait to be featured on Joe.ie. It is beautifully harmless. This is something you rarely see in countries where qualifying is taken for granted. There's just so much unique charm to how our country reacts to the success of our own athletes. Actually, let's take some celebrities I've already mentioned in this video, Jedward, Dustin the Turkey, Mrs. Brown, and put them all together in a Euro 2012 song. That's right, Jedward featuring Mrs. Brown in their music video. It's the crossover everybody was begging for. I really hope this is the last time I have to talk about Mrs. Brown in this video. This song just recycles the beat of Lipstick with rewritten lyrics falsely claiming that we had this competition in the bag. But I can't fault it. This is charming as hell. What the fuck? You best believe there were plenty of other songs written in support of the Irish team, the official anthem being The Rocky Road to Poland, performed by a variety of Irish musicians. I was obsessed with this song back then. I played it on repeat on my iPod Nano, and it still hits the same today. I cannot believe how genuinely catchy this thing is. The chorus of the song proclaims that you'll never beat the Irish, and while I love the sentiment, I'm not sure if I can agree with it. And taking a look at the results, yeah, the other teams definitely beat the Irish alright. It's a shame that Ireland got absolutely buried in the competition, following the incredible campaign of support and the gleeful optimism of the fans. But despite some disastrous matches and a total of 1 goal scored in the entire competition, Irish fans proved that their support is unconditional. This video right here takes place in the final minute of a devastating defeat to Spain, and it's a shining display of the heart and soul of Irish fans, no matter the situation. It felt like the fans were collectively communicating the fact that even if the match didn't go their way, they were standing together and supporting the players until the very end, as a final token of appreciation and respect for their achievements. They never gave up hope, and there was zero animosity towards the team. Everybody was just happy to be there, and they savoured every moment. Even though Ireland's efforts in the Euros were unsuccessful, the Irish fans definitely did not fail when it came to making an impact and standing out. And this brings us to 2013, a year characterised by 2 major food scandals, one being much more serious than the other. First of all, the infamous horse meat scandal. This was all over the news, as horse DNA was found in beef burgers that were being sold nationwide and advertised as pure beef. This issue was prevalent around Europe, triggering a full investigation and many meat products being recalled from supermarket shelves. I remember everybody acting like this was a hilarious news story when it broke out, which I find really confusing because to me, this is nothing but messed up. It was an absurd situation that I had never seen the likes of before, and to my surprise, this whole horse meat saga was eclipsed just a few months later when a more severe food scandal came to fruition. In April 2013, a new Irish product was released to the masses, featuring a cursed combination of confectionery. We're all familiar with these and we're familiar with this. Both of these snacks are best enjoyed when consumed separately, and everybody's happy. But what if we combined the two into one product? Those were the words of a psychotic executive in 2013 who is hopefully in prison right now, and our taste buds have not been the same ever since. Whoever allowed this to happen, I have so many questions. The Tayto Chocolate Bar was released as a limited edition product for good reason, and even though nobody found the concept very appealing, we were all too curious not to at least give it a try. If you ever did try one of these bars, you don't need to worry about what's in the vaccine. I'm pretty sure I only ever ate one, and that was more than enough, because this bar just tasted weird. It wasn't completely revolting in my opinion, it just started to taste worse and worse as I progressed, yet I couldn't bring myself to stop. The aftertaste it left when I finished was just nasty. This wasn't a chocolate bar, this was a hate crime. The general consensus was that combining two popular snacks doesn't create one good product, or even an edible one at that. Maybe it was worth a shot to experiment with the idea, but this is just wrong. I have trust issues with all chocolate bars now thanks to this asshole. But despite how terrible the Tayto bar was, I kinda want to try it again for the same reason as before, just morbid curiosity. Apparently they're available again in Tayto Park, but I don't think it's worth the journey and the possibility of catching COVID just to buy a chocolate bar infested with Tayto particles. And what do you know? At the time I'm recording this, they've just announced that Tayto won't be associated with the park effective next year. So fuck this idea, I guess. A few months later, the Tayto chocolate bar was out of our lives for good, and Ireland received a surprise visit from this thing called the sun. Who could forget the Irish heatwave of July 2013? In this country, a single day of 15-degree weather feels like a luxury. So when we're treated to 2 whole weeks with no rain and the temperature frequently hitting 30 degrees, it's gonna be a big deal. This is yet another instance of Irish people salvaging every moment of a rare event. When good weather strikes, there's no doubt that we'll take full advantage. This was such a blissful few weeks. Beaches were always packed. It was a great time to be an ice cream vendor selling overpriced marshmallow ice cream cones. And it simply felt like we were all living in Spain for a short period of time. But after 2 weeks, it was back to reality for everybody. No more beaches and barbecues, no more dads walking around the streets shirtless, and a lot more of this. Honestly, I don't think many of us were annoyed about being battered by rain once again. Irish people are not equipped to endure over 2 weeks of relentless sunshine without being burned to a crisp, so the rain certainly didn't arrive a moment too soon. Now, before we proceed, is there anything from 2013 that I've missed? I'm ready to move on to 2014 when you are. The events of 2014 have been discussed in some detail on this channel before, but I have yet to cover the defining story from that year. It was a year characterised by petty controversies and protests, as the GAA sold out to Sky Sports and Garth Brooks caused a national uproar. But both of these events pale in comparison to the most prominent controversy of 2014. If there's one thing that remained consistent in Ireland throughout the decade, it's government incompetence. 2014 was the year of water charges. A classic case study of the Irish public banding together to tell the government to shove it when they take ineptitude to a new level. Following years of government austerity, trying to charge us 5 cents to take a shit is what made Irish people come to a stunning realisation. Wait a minute, Irish politicians aren't good at their jobs? This led to a tumultuous year for Irish politics, as everyone collectively decided that now was the time to flip the script and start terrorising the government for a change. And nothing was off the table. Trap Joan Burton in her car for 2 hours in Jobstown? I have the day off, so why not? Of course, I wasn't very politically engaged back then. The only thing on my mind in 2014 was the release of Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS. But the water charges saga was the first Irish political scandal that almost radicalised me. The fury from my parents and the whole country about being charged to do this and this was palpable and somewhat contagious, and it spread to a sizable portion of people in my age group. This made no difference to us. We weren't the ones who'd have to pay the water bills. But even a clueless teenager can spot unqualified politicians from a mile away. Everybody in the country, regardless of their age or political leanings, was united in believing that these measures were ridiculous, and Joan Burton was public enemy number 1 at the time. While I've barely heard her name in recent years, it was almost impossible to escape hearing about the then Taoiseach during the pushback against water charges. Another universally despised figure was Phil Hogan. In August 2020, he was more concerned with driving around the country breaking as many rules as possible like a fucking Grand Theft Auto character. But back then, his main priority was to turn our water down to a trickle. That's a direct quote from the man himself, delivered exactly like a sniveling movie villain. How he ever thought that a statement like this would get the public rallying behind him, we'll probably never understand. But good luck trying to figure out his thought process behind anything he says. On a lighter note, in the midst of the chaos of Irish life in 2014, there was an opportunity for us to be proud of our country. While we were busy rebelling against the government and trying to coerce Garth Brooks into giving us those concerts, it was announced that a few minutes of an upcoming Star Wars movie would be filmed on the island of Skellig, one of the most popular and recognisable movie franchises in history, filming a scene in our humble country. This was a solid reason for everybody to temporarily calm down, appreciate the beautiful scenery and nature that Ireland is known for, and partially restore our national pride. Then we went back to throwing water balloons at Joan Burton. I mean, it had to be done. It took many years of protests, holding Irish water employees hostage, and coming up with the most creative chants I've ever heard. But the government finally gave in to our relentless stubbornness and retired the idea of water charges for good. It was a messy state of affairs and a colossal waste of time, but it served as proof that the Irish people can achieve anything when they band together and rise up. I just wish certain people would do it less often. Another highlight from the summer of 2014 was the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. The concept was simple: raise awareness for motor neuron diseases by making a video where a bucket of ice cold water is dumped over your head, and nominate some of your friends and family to complete the challenge within 24 hours, essentially creating a never-ending cycle of these videos. Believe it or not, Facebook was a pretty relevant and less dangerous platform in August 2014. If you were active on Facebook at this time, you'll definitely understand me when I say that Ice Bucket Challenge videos had a stranglehold over everybody's news feeds. These things were everywhere. I distinctly remember counting 20 uninterrupted Ice Bucket Challenge videos in a row one time. It seemed like everybody on the planet was forced into this challenge at some point, myself included, but I am not letting you watch that. Retrospectively speaking, I feel like the core message of spreading awareness for ALS was kinda lost somewhere along the way. It became less about the cause and more about just posting funny videos and pissing off your friends by nominating them. But then again, the final donations tally speaks for itself, so it's safe to say that this whole trend did accomplish its main objective, which was wonderful to see. And at least it wasn't anything like the Harlem Shake. As for the rest of 2014, there's not much else that comes to mind except... a Mrs. Brown's Boys movie? I thought I told you to fuck off! Moving swiftly onto 2015, one obscure thing that it seems nobody else remembers from this year is the Burger King Tralee Facebook page. It's a pretty simple story to tell. A customer complains about waiting for a few minutes at a drive-thru, and Burger King tells him to go to McDonald's and eat their shit food. This incident seems to have been completely forgotten and lost to time. Only 2 people have mentioned it online since 2016, and one of those people is me. At the time though, this was all over Facebook for like 2 days, and the people were conflicted on whether this response was rude and unprofessional or just hilariously candid. This little dry shite didn't see the humour in it and thought it was uncalled for coming from a corporate page, but it's a lot funnier when you look back on this knowing that the page was indeed a fake, as many had thought. It may not be remembered, but out of all the Burger King Tralee Facebook page related scandals I've heard of, this has got to be the funniest one. Another passing headline from 2015 that more people actually remember is when Ireland did a major oopsie and accidentally legalised over 100 drugs for 48 hours, including ecstasy and ketamine. Everybody makes mistakes, alright? Of course, emergency legislation was quickly introduced to erase this loophole, but not before many had already taken advantage. So that covers 2 minor, forgettable headlines from 2015. But this was also the year that gave us what I would consider the most significant Irish event of the decade. It was announced in 2013 that Ireland would hold a referendum 2 years later to legalise same-sex marriage. My first question was why this was ever considered a crime in the first place. Illegal is a strong word to apply to the concept of 2 consenting adults getting married. But the good news was that we had a chance to rectify this. And in a pleasantly surprising result, Ireland once again made a good choice when voting for something. Except for one constituency that just had to be edgy. The same-sex marriage referendum of 2015 signified a profound turning point for this country, an event that put Ireland on the map globally as a leader in social progress, despite, you know, everything else. Ireland's accelerated venture from being a hideously conservative island that hated everybody who doesn't fit this description to becoming the first country in the world to legalise same-sex marriage by popular vote really was an admirable tale that illustrated how far we've come. It was a day where all counties just unanimously agreed, for the sake of basic rights, that voting yes was the right decision. But apparently some people didn't get the memo. Yeah, Roscommon South Leitrim was the odd one out in the result of this referendum, presumably seeking attention to affirm that these counties actually exist. But I'm still not convinced. When I was doing research for this video, I was surprised to discover that lots of people are very protective of Roscommon South Leitrim. Apparently this is a sensitive topic, and it's in poor taste to criticise a constituency for deliberate homophobia, so I better choose my words carefully. But to be fair, it's not like the amendment was rejected there in a landslide. It was still a close result, and we can't ignore the fact that 17,000 people voted yes. When you analyse the numbers, the result isn't too different from that of constituencies where the yes vote was just barely victorious. I have no doubt that LGBT people and allies from this constituency were disappointed to be grouped in with the no voters, and perhaps the result would have been different if the referendum took place today. But I still maintain it was really unsatisfying that one constituency spoiled what could have been a clean sweep. Petty complaints about this mythical area aside, this referendum was a resounding victory for the yes movement, so there was little reason to be disappointed. This was a monumental day for Ireland's LGBT community. You could just feel the excitement from watching these videos and... Wait, what the fuck are you doing here? While it certainly didn't eradicate homophobia, this was a day where Ireland proved that it was heading in the right direction, with Dublin in particular reporting amazingly high support for this amendment. I had massive respect for Dublin being so progressive and leading the charge, but later that year, they began their streak of All-Ireland victories that lasted until 2020. So you know what? F Dublin too. 2016 walked so 2020 could run. Before we lived through 5 history textbooks in 1 year, I remember 2016 gaining notoriety for several celebrity deaths, Brexit, the election of the Orange Man, and killer clowns that randomly started appearing worldwide. Not to mention the fact that a gorilla was one of the most famous figures from that year. Totally normal events in a totally normal world. Yearning for the end of 2016 was a popular trend for quite some time, but when you specifically focus on the Irish experience during 2016, there isn't much that sticks out. The first thing that comes to mind is the 100th anniversary of the Easter Rising, one of the most significant events in Irish history, and it was celebrated accordingly all over the country. Every school in Ireland held commemorations that I imagine were pretty much the exact same. Raise the Irish flag, read the proclamation, listen to some speeches from the principal followed by traditional music and dancing, and send everybody back to class. But beyond schools, there was a nationwide effort to appropriately commemorate the occasion in various ways, and the importance of this anniversary was clearly recognised. Oh, we also got flooded. When you think of floods in Ireland, County Cork probably comes to mind right away. Getting flooded is just a way of life in the rebel county. But in early 2016, a wider selection of counties suffered some nasty floods. This included Cork as you'd expect, as well as Galway, Clare, Kilkenny and Westmeath, just to name a few. For the second time in this decade, Ireland was kicking off the new year with treacherous weather. And what an awful start to the year it was for so many people. I somehow didn't remember these floods until I started researching for this video, but the evidence clearly illustrates how devastating this was. Streets became swimming pools and some houses were severely damaged, so it took quite some time to undo all this chaos and fully recover from the floods. And based on the current state of the climate, we should probably start getting used to this. This has taken a very serious and depressing turn, so I think we need a bit of cheering up as we move on to 2017. And what better way to put a smile on your face than by talking about Babestation once again? It's all been leading up to this, the most absurd Irish story from the 2010s by far. I invite you to sit down, get comfortable, and let Uncle PKMX tell you about how the elderly community in Westport, County Mayo was terrorised with erotic phone calls. It was a situation as bizarre as it sounds, and I feel like I can do the story no justice with my explanation, but I will certainly try my best. So a few Irish people call into the TV channel Babestation. What kind of loser would even do that? But a mix-up with the calling codes leads to the innocent citizens of Westport receiving these explicit phone calls instead. The community was understandably horrified. Horny Irishmen phoning them to talk about condoms and lubricants or whatever was the last thing any of these people expected. So this situation had to be resolved somehow. Babestation was quickly made aware of what had happened, so 3 of their models were kind enough to fly out to Westport, where they would formally apologise to local residents. Thankfully, everybody saw the humour in the situation and there were no hard feelings, so the Babestation models and Westport civilians made amends and moved on rather quickly. Who the fuck gave Mrs. Brown a talk show? This was a busy year for the cast of Mrs. Brown's Boys, receiving a spin-off series and getting busted for tax avoidance. Agnes and the family being accused of storing money in offshore accounts. Now that's an episode of Mrs. Brown's Boys I don't remember seeing. Paddy Houlihan, the actor who portrays Dermot Brown in the series, defended himself by basically saying, "I have no idea what tax avoidance is, and I didn't know I was doing it." That's what they all say. Between the Babestation models visiting Westport and Agnes Brown being accused of dodging her taxes, this was a year nobody could ever forget. When you reflect on 2018, the visit of Pope Francis is simultaneously one of the most memorable and forgettable events in recent history. We remember that it happened and there was no avoiding media coverage of his trip, but nobody has really spoken about it since he left. It kinda just happened and there was a resounding lack of interest for most people then and now. 3 years later, the Pope's excursion to Ireland is completely irrelevant, and one short video from the same year has proved itself to be far more memorable to the Irish people. Ah, the Healy Raes, some of the most polarising figures in Irish politics. You either love them or you can't stand them. Some people have cited their dedication to representing their local rural communities, while others are turned away by their whole culty caricature gimmick. Personally, I've always just seen them as the comic relief characters in Dáil Éireann. I tried to ignore their views to keep my sanity intact, and this was proved to be true in February 2018, when an intense shouting match erupted in the House. Irish politics, ladies and gentlemen. These guys seem to have made a habit out of going viral for shouting culty noises in the Dáil. Michael even did it all by himself 2 years later, and I couldn't be more proud.
You're all in the bottom of the barrel now, coming out with that sort of a statement.
While we're on the topic of politics, Michael D's term as president was coming to an end, and it was time for another election. What does the President of Ireland do? I asked it 22 minutes ago, I still don't fucking know. Keep in mind that the circumstances are very different this time round. Michael D is running for re-election, and he has cemented himself as a universally adored figure since he became president. And who do we have running against him? Gavin Duffy and Peter Casey from Dragon's Den. Did we really think anybody but Michael D was going to win this? The 2018 election was one of the easiest choices in history. There was never any doubt that Michael D would walk it, and we were all comfortable enough to just play it safe and vote for the guy with the cute dogs. 3 out of the 6 candidates were Dragon's Den personalities. We weren't going to take a risk with any of these guys. But interestingly enough, this included Sean Gallagher, who was the only Dragon's Den representative in 2011 and was now walking into an election with a radically different landscape. We already spoke about how the victory was snatched from his hands last minute earlier in this video, and he surely wasn't too thrilled about that, so he returned with a vengeance to claim what was rightfully his. This could have been his inspiring comeback story 7 years in the making, but come on. Michael D was right there. Surprisingly, Gallagher didn't even achieve second place here like he did in 2011. Separating him from the 2-time champion was... Peter Casey? What the fuck? Just like the Orange Man over in the States, I always considered Peter Casey as the joke candidate in this election who didn't stand a chance. But we all saw how that story ended, so we couldn't rule him out completely. For a large portion of his campaign, he was doing just about as well as expected, but he somehow catapulted from dead last in the opinion polls to second place in the actual election. So it'll be interesting to evaluate how he accomplished such a sudden surge in support. Oh, he talks shit about travellers and people who receive social welfare. 23% of the country really told on themselves here. Casey was such a surprising runner-up, especially when you consider the fact that he has no skills or redeeming qualities. But just like with the 2015 referendum, we still achieved a favourable result in the end, so I'll try my best not to complain. I will say though, I exposed this man for using Twitter bots in 2019 with hard evidence. He should have been cancelled there and then. I would move on to 2019, but I can't escape 2018 without having a proper discussion about the visit of Pope Francis. Do you want to know what my favourite thing about this was? Nobody gave a shit. Yeah, there was a shared feeling of burning indifference for the Pope in 2018. This was our first papal visit since 1979, and Irish society had evolved beyond recognition since then. Like I said in my Garth Brooks video, Pope Francis drew pathetic crowd numbers compared to a washed-up country singer, and it's easy to understand why. We finally have zero tolerance for institutional abuse. Took us long enough to reach that point, and it's become more evident in recent years that an organisation populated with senile, abusive old gremlins actually shouldn't receive our support. Just look at the crowd in 2018 compared to 1979. Isn't this a beautiful sight? So, to summarise the Pope's visit, the usual suspects were out in full force to catch a glimpse of him, but an overwhelming majority opted to stay home. He visited a few cathedrals in his Pope-mobile, met a superior elderly white guy, and in all fairness, he did apologise for the atrocities committed by the church in this country. Sorry doesn't undo years of systemic abuse though, does it, Francis? But who cares about the Pope? 3 months prior to his visit, Ireland was already rejecting conservative Catholic ideals, as we did the unthinkable and allowed women to have control over their own bodies for a change. Ireland successfully repealed the 8th Amendment in another historic vote following a tireless campaign, and just like the referendum from 3 years earlier, it was a symbol of change and a new era for Ireland. So when we reflect on the most significant events of the decade, we have the same-sex marriage and abortion referendums, and Babestation models flying out to Westport. Truly a decade for the history books. But there is one more year from this decade that is yet to be covered. Before we wrap things up by taking a look at 2019, I'd like to give some honourable mentions to smaller stories that were memorable to a certain extent, but didn't quite warrant a full discussion. And we are kicking off the honourable mentions with Thierry Henry, so the following footage may be distressing and soccer fans are advised to look away now. Okay, so we're stretching the rules a little bit here. The infamous handball incident occurred in November 2009, but I'm including it because it screwed Ireland out of the 2010 World Cup. It was a miserable way to end the 2000s, and you can bet that Irish soccer fans have not and will not ever forget this moment. By illegally using his hand to keep the ball in play, Henry assisted a goal that ultimately crushed Ireland's World Cup dreams. It's not like Ireland would have gotten anywhere in the World Cup had they qualified for it anyway. It's been proven on multiple occasions that we're good at many sports, but soccer isn't exactly our forte. Regardless, it would have been nice to at least show face there. It's one of the most notorious events in Irish sporting history. Just say the words Thierry Henry to any Irish person, and there's a strong chance it'll cause a traumatic flashback. Forget Joan Burton, Henry was public enemy number 1 in Ireland for a long time following this match. And in a way, he always will be. 2010 also saw the eruption of an Icelandic volcano that I won't even attempt to pronounce. This eruption was a nuisance for all Europeans. Flights were cancelled left, right and centre because dangerous conditions in the sky rendered it impossible for planes to travel as normal. It impacted millions of people in so many different ways, but I just remember being annoyed that WWE shows were affected by it. 2009 was the year that kicked off the Ryan Tubridy era of the Late Late Tye Show, which operated in full swing throughout the 2010s and provided plenty of classic moments along the way. One of my personal favourites that is shared by most of Ireland is the Any Craic kid. He just rolled in on his tractor, showed Tubridy who's boss, and drove away as if he didn't just create an all-time great Irish TV moment. Throughout the decade, the Late Late Show hosted a variety of memorable guests, such as the Singing Priest, Nathan Carter 1,000 times, Christy Moore, and oh come on! The 2010s was a decade of stupid online challenges that unfortunately made their way to Ireland. As mentioned earlier, the Ice Bucket Challenge was fairly harmless and was for a good cause, so I don't think it warrants any criticism. I am not going to spend a second talking about the Harlem Shake. I will just flex the fact that even this fool had good enough judgment not to take part in any of those videos. Other challenges included eating cinnamon. I had a lapse in judgment for that one. The knife song was also a trend at around the same time. I cut my hand with a chisel in first year woodwork trying to do this. The mannequin challenge was just boring, and I saw no reason to join that trend. Snorting condoms, that's just a typical weekend activity. I was surprised that this was considered a challenge. Neck nominations took over social media for far too long. Not only was it a stupidly dangerous challenge, but it also had dire consequences, and I hope this is never replicated again. The human race should strive to be better than this. I'm just going to put it out there that my friend and I learned the cup song in about 20 minutes, while most people in my school struggled to perfect it during their daily practice sessions in the canteen. Dabbing was something I never cared for, and I still physically cannot bring myself to do this. Oh, and Momo was a thing for about 2 weeks in 2019. Has anyone heard from her recently? Nothing will ever top the man who slipped on the ice according to the general public. But RTÉ News still had its fair share of intriguing characters throughout the decade. The sheep farmer from Kerry speaking an alien language, the guy with the weed hat, the frostbite guy with the funny accent, and who could forget Teresa Mannion rising to stardom with the greatest weather report of all time.
Don't make unnecessary journeys. Don't take risks on treacherous roads.
These words are forever ingrained into our heads. But there's one more news segment that I believe should be mandatory viewing for all citizens.
No happy birthday, Trump. Up the noses.
This absolute Chad is who I aspire to be. Refusing to wish Leo Varadkar a happy birthday on national television and supporting nurses while you're at it? That is king shit right there. I'm just saying, if we built a statue of this guy, I'm willing to bet that it wouldn't be vandalized every other day. And I'm pretty sure that covers just about everything from 2010 to 2018. Hang on a second, they made a Mrs. Brown's Boy stage musical? So that brings us to the end of the honourable mentions, and it's finally time to move on to 2019. I think a lot of us feel nostalgic for 2019, for the sole reason that it was our last year of normality before the pandemic took away everything that's sacred to us. But I surprisingly struggled to remember any notable stories from that year. And from my research, I couldn't really find anything. I only have one event listed for 2019, and what do you know, it's another high-profile visit from a prominent public figure. But this time, it's the Orange Man. Oh fuck. The Orange guy has been busy since I disappeared off YouTube, to say the least. Since my last video, he's been impeached twice, ejected from the White House once, and he certainly caused a fair share of conflict on his way out. We haven't heard much from him throughout the past year since the end of his term, but you can be assured that he's still out there flapping his gums. Although he has a worryingly large community of supporters, the Tangerine fella is a controversial figure worldwide, and I don't think many countries are rushing to welcome him for a visit. Ireland is no different. When it was announced that number 45 would be visiting us in 2019, there was a lot of resistance from the Irish public. This horrifying blimp was unveiled in 2018 and launched to any countries that wanted it, so Ireland naturally borrowed it for the occasion. I'm always ready to lampoon the orange bastard, but I feel like the whole baby throwing a tantrum gag is a bit overdone and lacks originality. I do appreciate the intentions though, and the blimp sent a clear message that we rejected the Twitter-obsessed fascist. See, we actually have good taste in politicians over here. In comparison to the previous visits we've already spoken about, this one was strikingly unceremonious. It wasn't treated like a major event by any means. There was no red carpet, no spectacular entrances or cheering crowds like you'd expect for an American president. The complete lack of grandeur, especially for a guy who normally can't get enough of the spotlight, was a testament to his horrible reputation. There were no similarities between this and the visits of JFK and Obama, just to name a few examples. It all felt so low-key, and I didn't even hear that much about it when it happened. Apparently, he just spoke with some Irish politicians and played golf at his course in Doonbeg. The bare minimum we expected and nothing more. He didn't play hurling and he didn't pull a pint of Guinness. But his children did, and what the fuck is that? So the president quietly returned to America after 2 days with the real Melania, and his underwhelming visit was officially over. He had a fun time here, just relaxing and playing golf, and now it was time to get back to the White House to relax, play golf, and destroy American society. We then finally made it to the end of the 2010s, and we were naively optimistic that another great decade was on its way. How the fuck are we still alive? So we entered the year 2020. It proves itself to be one of the most difficult years in recent memory. A pandemic suddenly turns life upside down, and we live through a series of major historical events. We have a general election shortly before the virus arrives here, and Ireland's voting decisions seem to be heading in the right direction while still not being quite great. So a hopeless government just puts itself in power, right in time for an emergency that requires strong, focused leadership. It's like the plot of a terrible sitcom. My creative drive is depleted, and I can't face my favourite hobby for 2 years because I am never in the right mindset, and I imagine that I am not alone in saying that. So it's natural that when most of this decade so far has been such a surreal experience, we fondly reflect on a decade where everything was normal, depending on how loose your definition of normal is. I think we all shared this feeling to a certain extent. We want our old lives back, and we would love to relive the 2010s all over again, just to experience that normality we've been so deprived of. However, let's not forget that life was still miserable in its own way back then. What are we nostalgic for? A different recession? But of course, just the simple fact that we weren't living through a deadly pandemic, that alone is sufficient reasoning to claim that the last decade was superior to this one. But the question is, what exactly awaits us this decade? What are we fighting for? What can we even look forward to as soon as we get this pandemic under control? Well, at least I might be able to afford my own house before the climate catastrophe. Oh wait, I live in Ireland. It's difficult to feel optimistic that the rest of the 2020s will be any less depressing than its first 2 years. Many of us feel completely hopeless, and I think that's absolutely justified. Even if we sometimes convince ourselves that everything was so much better 10 years ago, there was a different economic crisis, there was a different shitty government, there was a different generation of graduates emigrating. We experienced the same problems back then, except this time we also have a pandemic, an even more unstable climate, and now a fucking war thrown into the mix. But despite everything, no matter how bleak the future may seem at times, I really don't want any of us to lose hope completely, because that tiny glimmer of hope is what prevents us from going absolutely insane. And we still have good reason to believe that things may get better soon. Most of the Irish population is fully vaccinated, myself included, and restrictions have become a thing of the past. so it feels like a return to normality is just around the corner. And we have a lot of things to be excited for. We can socialise without any worries, the Tidy Towns competition is going ahead as normal, Mrs. Brown's Boys has been renewed until 2026. We are never going to experience true happiness again.